This presentation of In Their Own Words is brought to you by The Honor Project and is dedicated to the brave men and women of the United States Armed Forces. Operating under the most brutal conditions imaginable, combat medics fought to save lives as the war raged around them. In Vietnam, helicopters became virtual hospitals in the air, buying the combat medic valuable time to heal the wounded. Today, Max Cleland is a U.S. Senator from the state of Georgia. But in 1968, he was fighting in Vietnam. His tour was cut short by an accident that left him a multiple amputee. Perhaps more than anyone, he knows the valor of the men who try to save lives in the heat of combat. Senator Cleland recounts the accident that changed his life forever.
I felt that Vietnam was the war of my generation that I could not avoid, and I didn't want to avoid it. I was in uniform, I was a young lieutenant, I was on active duty as a young ROTC graduate, and it was the mid-60s, and by 1967 I volunteered for Vietnam and went with the 1st Air Cavalry Division. The 1st Air Cavalry Division was later committed after the Tet Offensive in early 1968 to relieve the siege of Khe Sanh. So I went with that relief unit with the 1st Cav, surrounding the hills near Khe Sanh. On one mission, I was a communications officer for an infantry battalion at the time, and I went to unload my radio team on a hill so we could set up a radio relay into Khe Sanh for the battalion moving into Khe Sanh, breaking the siege there that week. I got off a helicopter, ducked under the helicopter blades, had my flak vest on, my steel pot, some grenades on my web gear, had my M16 in my left hand, turned around, looked at the helicopter, it took off, looked down, there was a grenade. Now, I didn't anticipate that it was an enemy grenade or that it was live, because grenades had fallen off my web gear a lot. You know, you're moving around, you're jumping around, you're in and out of bunker and dodging rockets and whatever, and so life was pretty confusing. And so I thought it was mine. I thought it dropped off my web gear, and I still think probably it did. But I had my M16 in my left hand. I reached down with my right hand to get it. I must have been about 5 or 6 inches from it when it went off. Technically, I should be dead because the killing radius of a grenade is about 5 yards or 5 meters. You're within that, you're dead. Well, my flak vest helped save me. My steel pot was blown off, and my left hand was saved because it was behind me holding my M16. But my right arm was blown off instantly. My right leg was blown off instantly. And my left leg was so badly mangled, it was amputated within the hour. So there I am, laying on the ground, my windpipe shattered, can't speak, can't talk, and I'm laying on the ground, bleeding and dying. Well, unbeknownst to me, a team of 4 Navy medical corpsmen attached to the Marine Corps were right there on that hill. I mean, Providence, good Lord, was looking after me. There's 4 medics, not just 1, but 4, right there on that hill. They rushed to me. And I can remember when they started cutting off my uniform, I thought, you know, in the military, uniform is sacrosanct. And I thought, here I am missing almost 2 legs and my right arm, and I'm bleeding and dying, and I'm thinking, God, don't cut off my uniform. But they knew what they were doing. So they started cutting off my uniform, making an immediate tourniquet to stop the bleeding. And they called in an immediate dust-off, or helicopter, a Huey, that was, in effect, the lifeline. But while I was laying there, they took care of me and made sure I got on the medevac helicopter, which got me to the Division aid station. There, other medics took over. I had an IV put in the chopper on the way to the bunker, and 1 shot of morphine. And they started asking me my name, rank, and service number. And I thought, you gotta be kidding me, man. You know, I guess it was to, you know, make sure we tag this body properly, you know. And so I looked up at one medic and I said, you think I'm gonna make it? And he said, you just might, you know. I figured under the circumstances it was pretty much a word of encouragement. So I was put on a helicopter again, flown to Quonset hut on the South China Sea. All this done within an hour. And my life was saved by a team of 5 physicians. But it was the medics that got to me first. And the medics in the helicopter that got the IV in, and it was the medics in the bunker in the Division Aid Station that I think ultimately saved my life, and the reason I'm here talking to you today. I was totally stunned by the grenade explosion. It was deafening. It threw me back, and then I was just absolutely felt like I was burning all over. Later I found out it was the flash burn from the grenade that seared some of the wounds is the reason I didn't die on the spot right there in a few minutes. But I lay there bleeding and dying and calling out for help. And it was a powerful sense of helplessness, which I really have to say, that's why I think so much of medics. I mean, any military person who has ever been wounded or shocked or gone through trauma or whatever and had to call for a medic or call for help and is attended by a medic, boy, I'll tell you, you never forget that. And you never forget those young men who saved my life. The tragedy is I never knew their names. They went on to other situations in the war. And looking back, God knows, I really owe my life to them.
Cleland knew that the odds were against him in those first moments.
I was amazed. Looking back, I didn't know that they were medics at the time. I didn't know they were Navy corpsmen, trained medics, 4 of them, attached to the Marine Corps at the time, that happened to be on that hill when I was on it. I mean, again, Providence, I think, intervened in my life and saved my life right there on the battlefield through the lives of 4 medics and their skill to respond instantly to a life-threatening situation for a soldier. And later, I look back, what are the odds that 4 trained corpsmen, medics, are going to be right there with you when you have 3 limbs basically blown off and are bleeding and dying on the ground? What are the odds? Pretty remote. But that's what medics do. They get there and they stop the bleeding, they get the IV in, they stabilize you as best you can, they talk to you, they encourage you, and they get you as soon as humanly possible to further aid and ultimately surgery. And they did that all within the hour. In Vietnam, the statistics were that if you were wounded and were able to receive medics and medical attention within the hour and didn't have a head injury, you stood a 98% chance of survival. But what that did was complicate life back in the States, because what happened was we had 10,000 amputees out of the Vietnam War. More arms, legs, and eyes were lost in the Vietnam War than in World War I and Korea combined. So you save life on the battlefield through incredible, miraculous medics and their training, and that just complicates the rehabilitation process back here. But at least your life is saved on the battlefield, and I consider that, and in my case, certainly a miracle. They kept talking to me, and they kept talking to each other, and looking back, they were really professional, and I wondered, how in the world do they know what they're doing? I just thought it was a group of guys just got together and started, But looking back, they were trained, and they were really pros, and it wasn't just a couple of guys standing around and all of a sudden they saw an emergency. It was medics, and their skill and training really stabilized me in those first few seconds and those first few moments. They really did know what to do, and I couldn't do a thing but lay there, and but they really got the job done as well as can humanly be possibly done in those first few moments. And I didn't have a sense that I was literally drifting out of life, that life was oozing away from me. And I had this sense, powerful sense, that if I slipped into unconsciousness, I would never regain it. I'd never come back. I'm out of here. I know I'm leaving here. And if I lose consciousness, I ain't making it back. I mean, I just had that powerful knowing, in an instant almost. And so I fought to stay conscious. And their voices, their shouting, their activity, kept me in it, kept me conscious. Now, the fascinating thing about that is that's part of medical training, the training of medics.
During World War II, in the war in Europe, medics, for the most part, were respected by the enemy and not targeted. But the medics and corpsmen in Vietnam were not so fortunate.
It was much like you being acknowledged as a young lieutenant in the assault or a young radio telephone operator. You know, the snipers pick the RTO the first, and the person on each side of them, because one of them must be a leader. They also pick off the squad leader or the team leader, the point person. But the guy who is obviously the medic is the guy who can help save some lives, and they go after him too. And also, when that Red Cross was painted on the side of a dust-off, those dust-off pilots were the most courageous pilots in Vietnam, because they braved everything to get there and save a life. And so the medics and the dust-off pilots saved my life. And that's how I wound up to be a United States Senator. I would never made it here without them.
For Senator Cleland, the training of today's combat medics is critical.
I was just earlier this year in Schweinfurt, Germany, where ironically, it was 30 years to the day I was wounded in Vietnam, April 8, 68, April 8, 98. And it was the first time I'd been in an Army helicopter since I was in there with a medic putting an IV in my arm, blown away. 30 years ago. I went down to see in Schweinfurt, Germany, training of Army medics. And I saw their training, and it was very realistic. And I noticed how they're trained to talk to, in effect, their patients. Stay with me, don't lose it, I'm here, That's part of it, to keep the patient conscious. Because I knew if I'd lost consciousness, I was gone.
And I understand you had an encounter or saw a particular medic doing that, and you wanted to talk a little bit about him.
Yes, I was particularly impressed with one young man who went through the training, because he was not only good technically and in it, and with powerful distractions and bombs going off and smoke grenades and so forth, to make it very realistic. And taking 2 or 3 patients at a time, 2 or 3 litter casualties at a time, and he kept talking to him, and I thought, this guy's really good. And so afterwards, I brought him over and I said, I would have been honored for you to treat me, And afterwards, when I left, he said, he told Stars and Stripes, he said, I won't remember the general, but I'll always remember the senator in a wheelchair. And I hope every medic in the military, regardless of which branch of service, realizes that they got one United States Senator that somebody, one of their predecessors, saved on the battlefield that now appreciates their service. I think it is a special breed. I think they have to have a special commitment to people and to life and to life saving, because in effect, they're not underarms, so to speak. Soldiers are pretty much armed to the teeth. I was when I got wounded. Man, I had about everything you could carry, M16, 45, knife, everything, grenades. But medics are there to not take life, but save it. And actually, every time they do their job, they put themselves at risk. Every time. When they go to that wounded soldier, sailor, airman, Marine Corpsman, whatever, whenever they do that, they put themselves at risk. They put themselves in harm's way as well, but they're there to save a life and not take it.
But his biggest regret was not knowing the names of the men who saved his life.
I would like to know them. I'd like to know their names. I'd like to know what happened to them. I have no idea what unit. I have no idea who they were. I was told later by some people in the area that they were Navy corpsmen, and that's why they reacted so quickly and so well. They were attached to the Marine Corps. I was an Army guy, but it didn't matter. I was on the hill. I was in need. They came to me, and they saved my life. I would like to know more, but I guess I never will. But for all the corpsmen out there, I'd just like to say thanks. I hope I've earned it.
Clarence Sasser received the Medal of Honor for his courageous efforts as a combat medic in Vietnam. As a combat medic, the most valuable instrument in Clarence's arsenal was the helicopter.
The Huey, the dust-off medevac helicopters were probably the best thing that happened to those that were injured over there. They saved a lot of lives. They were first not in the form of the Huey, but first incorporated into emergency trauma on the battlefield during Korea from the MASH series. It was expanded during Vietnam to the UH-1D helicopters configured to carry stretchers of injured persons, soldiers. They were the lifesaver of a lot of people. The injuries in Vietnam were quite severe, particularly from the booby traps and things like that would blow off a leg or foot or something like that. And almost invariably during World War II, these people died because of blood loss, because of the delay in getting them back to, I want to say competent medical care, but we, as combat medics, we thought we were competent also. But to get them back to first-rank treatment, people that lost a leg with severe trauma to arteries and veins like that almost invariably died, bled to death. The Hueys would get them back to that advanced treatment so quickly until a lot of them were saved with emergency procedures. A lot of soldiers were saved. It's probably prudent of me to put a little praise on those people that flew those machines. If you called them, they came. If it was any way possible to get in there, they would get in there. And because of their attitude, their own bravery, a lot of people were saved. I know several guys that currently now that were double amputees, had parts blown off, lower legs blown off, that I know would have died in any other war other than Vietnam. So they were remarkable. They had a remarkable record in coming into hot spots, hot landing zones, picking up people and getting them out. They did wonders. I can't praise them enough. I can't praise those pilots enough.
But the times the helicopters weren't available to retrieve the wounded were pure hell for Sasser.
We went in to an area on helicopter slicks, we call them. Bring back a little memories. Some of them good, some of them bad. But we went into this area on helicopters. The entire company did. And it turned out to be a fairly hot area, which was, I really hate to say, sort of common back then, that you went in the areas and you found more than you expected. But it was sort of interesting because we were not scheduled for any action. We were a backup company on that mission. And we were just to take it easy until, or if and when, another company, someone got into trouble and needed some reinforcement, some backup, or somebody to pull them out, the term we used back then. And we were just cooling it. And orders came down from our battalion headquarters that wanted us to go check out an area that they had found that they suspected may be an area of activity. So we ate that morning and loaded on the helicopters about 9 that morning, went into this area, and it was daybreak the next morning before we got out, those of us that lived. It's a particularly distressing period to remember and everything. Probably the hardest part of it all was spending the night with my friends and just listening to them call, beg for help when you couldn't do anything. You knew some of them were dying, you knew they were dying. you knew you'd never see some of them again. As for myself, I had been injured fairly severely, but I guess being the medic, I knew that my injuries were not life-threatening. So, other than the pain and the trauma and the fright, it was something. It really was. But hell, I got through it. In times of intense stress such as this, there are certain things that need to be done. And in this instance, we were trapped in a rice field, no cover whatsoever. You couldn't, with enemy troops dug in, artillery already zeroed in on that position. We were taking severe incoming hits. And the safest thing to do would be to get to the tree line, and that's what I was trying to get my guys to do. Take the chance and get to the tree line. You're probably better off than staying out here. We were in dire straits, I guess, probably the best way to put it. And if you could make it to the wood lines, at least you'd have a little bit of cover other than a thin blade of rice, a thin rice stalk. It's one of those things that instinct tells you, I guess. But at any rate, that's what I was doing, encouraging them to at least try to make it to the wood lines by trying to get there. It was a lot better than just laying here waiting on things to come in to kill you. Probably the most striking remembrance of that day was the leeches. We were in a rice paddy, and of course you couldn't stand up. You had to lay in the water. Or the only protection or cover that was available were the levees, the dikes. That didn't afford very much protection. And to utilize those, you couldn't stand up. You couldn't stand up anyway because of the incoming and the snipers and the gunfire. But I remember laying in the water and fighting leeches all night, and just terrible. The night is always the worst part, and it's probably the worst part because it is night and you can't see. But the sounds were the sounds of sporadic gunfire, sporadic sniper fire, the sounds of fellow soldiers, I guess essentially dying. Probably the worst sound was hearing your fellow soldier, your friend, calling for his mama to help him. And there's nothing you can do. There's no help you can do other than comfort. If you could get there, having already been injured, wounded, there's very little I can do. Used up all of my medical supplies, had found another medic's bag and had used that up. And there's just nothing you can do. Plus there's the point of tempting fate of even trying to find him and get to him is again a further risk of your life.
In the eyes of the enemy, Sasser and his fellow combat medics were prized targets.
The whole thing was scary. But after a while, even that becomes second nature. That's what I find one of the most marvelous things about the human psyche, is you get used things, no matter how bad it is, it can get used to it, and it will get used to it if it's given enough time. The scariest moments, I had been helping a wounded soldier out and was going back to what I call my little spot, where at this point we're still in the rice paddy, and was going back to my spot where a friend was, where I knew that he was laying there. And I didn't dare stand up because, obvious reasons, stand up, the sniper can find me. It was obvious who I was or what I was to anybody observing the area. Medic was a fairly high priority in that you kill the medic and injured people die, so you got a much higher casualty rate. And all of a sudden I heard what we had come to know of as incoming. If you've been there, you can always tell when it's coming in just from the sound of it. I heard it, and I heard it, and I knew by the sound and the direction that it was going to land pretty close to me. The question is, what do you do? Do you freeze and stay, or do you try to get away? But again, you have only a few senses to try to figure out what's going to happen, where it's going to go, and all of that. But I knew this one was coming fairly close to me. So the method I had hit on to get around in the rice paddy, they were probably 40–45% mud with a little layer of water on top. The mud in this rice paddy was at least thigh deep with water up to the waist, and it made moving extremely difficult. So I had hit on the method of I could grab a handful of rice and just pull myself sliding over the water, over the mud in the water, and I could move around quicker that way. Plus I was down and was out of line of sight, in other words. So I heard this coming in, and oh man, oh Lord, it's going to be close. So I started moving and everything, and got to and understand when I say the distance, we're not talking over 10 or 12 feet, and got to a intersection of two dikes that formed a cross. And just as I was rolling up and was going to put my back out because I knew it was going to fall, they came down and hit right where I was when I realized that when I initially heard it. That to me probably was the scariest moment of knowing that if I didn't do something, it was going to get me. It still sprayed me with shrapnel and all of that, but again, not life-threatening.
Many of the soldiers treated by Sasser were victims of the Viet Cong's clever booby traps. However, the hardest obstacle he had to overcome was his own fear.
The most difficult thing I found there was involved isolated injuries or injuries from booby traps. There were a lot of booby traps set over in Vietnam. Some were self-effacing ones, others were command-detonated ones. What I found the scariest, most difficult thing to do was usually if somebody hit a booby trap, it was either our point man or the first in the lines in the line of movement that hit it. Invariably, when they hit a booby trap, the medic had to go. If it was a command detonated, that meant that somebody was sitting somewhere that pushed a button or threw a lever that detonated that when that soldier got within range. What if he set two there? did one and injured the person, and then when the medic came to see about him, do the other. That was always the scariest, most difficult thing to deal with, that if I go up here after him, how do I know it's not command detonated? Well, after a little while you learn to just trust your luck. It sort of breeds a little bit of that, and in fact, the whole war bred that type of thought. And if I can interject a personal opinion, it's probably the problem with those of us that have had problems readjusting. It promoted a situation of right now, of today. You know, why worry about tomorrow? I mean, you know, tomorrow I'll probably be dead. And when you get into a mentality like that, it becomes doubly hard on the mind to get to, shall we say, get out of it. Again, it's personal opinion, nothing to prove it, don't want anything to prove it, don't want to even think about it too much. But to me, it promoted a right now type attitude. Why should I worry about tomorrow? Tomorrow is definitely not promised, and I probably won't be here tomorrow. So to me, that was the worst thing about it, was the attitude it promoted in the soldiers. The chance of that almost any day, any minute, you know, it could be your last. While I believe that almost any soldier that was over there would have done what, I guess I'm gonna say what I did. I guess life sometimes tells me that maybe it's not. There were soldiers in the unit I was with that didn't do their job because of fear. And as we all know, fear can sometimes be very paralyzing. It's just a case of, as in directing the soldiers to the wood lines, somebody has to do something. When it comes to that, somebody has to do something. And I guess I always sort of feel it's better me than thee. At least I know what I'm doing, and it just action in itself relieves a little stress rather than sitting and succumbing to paralyzing fear, because it certainly can be fear. I mean, to be in a jungle type environment, pitch dark at night because of the canopy, no light can get through it anyway, and to hear something and know that there's a real good probability that booby traps are everywhere. I mean, that produces some ungodly fear.
With the busy fall season just around the corner, you might be looking for wholesome, convenient meals for jam-packed days. Factor, America's #1 ready-to-eat meal kit, can help you fuel up fast with chef-prepared, dietitian-approved, ready-to-eat meals delivered straight to your door. You'll save time, eat well, and stay on track with your healthy lifestyle. Too busy with your end-of-summer goals to cook but want to make sure you're eating well? With Factor, skip the extra trip to the grocery store and the chopping, prepping, and cleaning up too, while still getting the flavor and nutritional quality you need. Factor's fresh, never-frozen meals are ready in just 2 minutes, so all you have to do is heat and enjoy, then get back to crushing your goals. Level up with Gourmet Plus options prepared to perfection by chefs and ready to eat in record time. Treat yourself to upscale meals with premium ingredients like broccolini, leeks, truffle butter, and asparagus. With Factor, you can rest assured you're making a sustainable choice. We offset 100% of our delivery emissions, source 100% renewable electricity for our production sites and offices, and feature sustainably sourced seafood in our meals. This August, get Factor and enjoy eating well without the hassle. Simply choose your meals and enjoy fresh, flavor-packed meals delivered to your door, ready in just 2 minutes, no prep, no mess. Head to factormeals.com/warriors50 and use code warriors50 to get 50% off. That's code warriors50 at factormeals.com/warriors50 to get 50% off.
The camaraderie amongst the soldiers in Clarence Sasser's unit made his job as a medic seem all the more worthwhile.
You have to look at it in context. I lived with these guys. They were my friends. We ate, slept, joked, played, partied, and everything else together. They were friends. And I don't think that there is any person alive today that when a friend has a problem won't try to help them. And above and beyond, there are two other factors. Number one, it was my job. My job was to take care of them. If they got injured or wounded, my job was to take care of them. That was my job. I had no other job. And the second part of it was nobody needed a medic that wouldn't do his job. You were accorded a certain amount of status within the unit by virtue of being Doc, the medic. And along with that go obligations. One of those obligations is that if I'm hurt, Doc, you'll look out for me. Yeah, I'll take care of you. Well, that's a promise. So you throw all of those in together, and I refuse to believe that any prudent person wouldn't do it. It's probably, if I were to guess at it, I would say it's probably one of the reasons the powers that be put the medic with the platoon and had him live with them rather than when they go out to draw a medic as you would draw a carbine or something of that nature. You form bonds, you form camaraderie, and along with that go obligations. I felt particularly strong about it because of that. Within the platoon, and there are four platoons in a company, and each platoon had a medic. Within the platoon, you were accorded a certain amount of status. For instance, when we were out for extended periods of time, and we were resupplied with sea rations to food, the first case that was broke open, the doc got his choice out of it. Well, there's an obligation to that. And that obligation is that you will do your job when the time comes, regardless. And that's what it is. You could always say, well, I don't know, I think it's too hot to go out there. Hot as in the lid and not the temperature. You could always say it's too hot to go out there, but what about that person's friend that's watching what's going on? What's he going to think about you? What's he going to do to you? Remember, we are in a combat zone where there are no laws other than survival and kill the enemy. So what's going to happen if his friend is out there dying and you refuse to go because you're scared or you may get hurt? You may not get hurt. So what's going to happen? What's he going to do when his friend dies and he say, the doc didn't go? Just may find you next time a firefight break out, you just may be a casualty. There have been instances, I'm sure. I can't quote any, but I'm sure there have been instances, just as there have been other instances of things that weren't quite proper. But you go. It's your job to go. It's your duty to go. And that's why.
But according to Sasser, the combat medic had to assume many roles on and off the battlefield.
We had a chaplain in the company, but chaplains were at least company grade. Uh-huh. And but that is another part of a medic. A medic's job, I guess, sort of like as a listener, a psychiatric type counselor to the people, to the soldiers, I should say. And you listen and you talk to them and you discuss girlfriends and Dear John letters and things of that nature, and pats on the back for a good job and all of that. And it's just, it has a tremendous settling effect on the troops to know that if something happened, Doc will be there, Doc will take care of me. And it's a tremendous psychological advantage, I think. Again, a reason for them to be with them.
What about the role of being the mother hen?
Yeah, you looked out for your people. It's again part of his job. His job is the welfare, the care, the health of the entire platoon. If one has a problem, it's just like a mother hen. If one has a problem, you go get him and you go try to square it away. Whatever, if you had to go to the CO about it, whatever, you did it. Whatever the guys came to you about, you tried to work with it. And of course, there's also that little point about confidant in the equation too. You listen to their cares, their troubles, their fears, and if it warranted action, it was your job to do it. In other words, it was a mother hen type situation in that you looked out for your people. You did whatever you thought would help this person to be a better soldier, particularly when you were out in the field. In the base camp, there were other avenues for them, but out in the field, it was your job to look after their welfare. It was your job to stand up for them if their injuries were such that they needed to go back in. It was your job to get to the CO to get him back in. Without a doubt, you have a lot of them die in your arms, and that's not a good feeling. Depends on where it was. Of course, in TV, you always see them as saying the last words and all of that, and then an exhalation of breath, and then they're dead. A lot of times they're unconscious when you got there. There was no such thing as confession. Just a matter of holding them and trying to get them on across to the other side. There's nothing you could do. Happens a lot. Happened a lot. But life goes on.
Clarence Sasser remains proud to have been that special breed of soldier known as the combat medic.
I was a medic, but above that, I was a soldier. I like to think I was a soldier. I chipped in and helped the platoon do things that was termed routine. I pulled CQ watch along with them. I helped clean weapons, and I just like to think I did my job. You see somebody down, it's ingrained in you to help them. It's ingrained in the medics to help, and it's probably something brought out by the aptitude test that they give you when you go in. I would like to think that's what it is, but no medic or former medic can ever not helping someone that's down. There have been instances since I've been out of the service where I came up on automobile accidents, and the urge to help is there. Several such instances was there. Again, it goes back to somebody has to do something. It's just ingrained in you that your job is to help people. A medic has been a special person throughout all warfare. It's genuinely recognized that some injuries in war may not be totally disabling to a soldier, and with sufficient treatment, you regain the use of that soldier. Plus, there's the psychological advantage of knowing that if I get hurt, someone's here to take care of me. They won't leave me behind to die. That, in my estimation, has a bearing on the temperament of a fighting soldier. It's a tradition way back to the Civil War with Dr. Mary Walker, back to the Revolutionary War with medics during those times. So it does have a long and glorious history of which I'm especially proud that I fitted in, that I was one. I am especially proud, although I mean nothing by the statement, that my medal was awarded for saving lives rather than taking lives. To me, it makes a difference. Although in life it does not make a difference, but to me it makes a difference. It's a point of satisfaction for me. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the camaraderie. I enjoyed the status that it bestowed on me. I'm a people person. I was a people person before, and it fell in with that. Had it to do over again, I don't have any regrets. I mean, I could leave out the injuries and all of that, as I'm sure everybody would, but other than that, I don't have any regrets. I am intensely proud to be able to have won a medal or been awarded a Medal of Honor, since most people think you win it, but really you don't win it. It's I guess, technically earned and everything. I'm intensely proud to be a Medal of Honor recipient. To me, it epitomizes that I did my job. Nothing more, nothing less.
We hope you've enjoyed this presentation of In Their Own Words. This program was created and produced by First Person Productions in association with the Documentary Broadcasting Company. The stories told herein were supplied by The Honor Project. Produced by David Benson. Content written and produced by Dave Barsky. Engineered by Greg Bartheld and Brian Donovan. Narrated by Bill Ratner. This production is copywritten by First Person Productions, Incorporated. Any unauthorized broadcast, public performance, or copying is a violation of applicable laws.
This is Peter.
And this is Tom.
We want to tell you guys a little bit about our podcast. Tom and I met in college, became best friends, and then teachers almost 20 years ago. Sometimes school just does not allow us to elaborate on the topics that we find interesting, like the real shark attacks that inspired the movie Jaws, or the real historical context to Indiana Jones artifacts. Where does cereal come from? Or are zombies real? Does Ben Franklin really deserve to be on a $100 bill? On our podcast, just like in our class, there are no stupid questions.
Just two friends having a lighthearted conversation about history, pop culture, and the context of current events.
Listen to History Teachers Talking Podcast from Evergreen Network, anywhere you get your podcasts.
We hope you enjoyed the podcast. Thanks for sticking around. We think you'll really enjoy this next recommendation. Keep listening to discover more great content.
Hey everyone, welcome to The Restless Ones. I'm Jonathan Strickland. As always, my focus is on exploring the intersection of technology and business by having conversations with the most forward-thinking leaders. Throughout my career, I've covered everything from massive parallel processing to advanced robotics, but what truly inspires me are the stories of innovation and transformation. Today, I got to sit down and have a conversation with Cleland CEO Sander Sebastian Agur, and his story went in a different direction from what I expected. What if you identified a technological need, not just a business imperative, but a lofty goal that revolved around achieving significant technological innovation? And then, what if in pursuit of this, you zeroed in on a particular business case for the technology to serve as your company's mission? I think it would be fair to say that Cleland has followed such a path. But first, what is Cleland? It's a company that develops autonomous and teleoperated delivery vehicles intended to bring last-mile solutions to customers. Cleland developed both the hardware and the software needed to provide this service, and works with dozens of other companies to create vehicles capable of navigating public roads safely and efficiently. But these vehicles, while unmanned, aren't unsupervised. An operator can monitor a vehicle, or multiple vehicles, from a remote center of operations. To achieve this outcome, a lot of technology needs to be in place, including a robust communications network capable of sending information with very low latency. Clearly, Cleland's methodology is made possible largely thanks to advancements in wireless communications. I would chat with Sander about this and lots more in a great conversation. But to get started, I wanted to ask about Sander's own background, which would involve chatting a little bit about planes. Sander, I want to welcome you to our podcast, The Restless Ones. I'm very excited to have you on the show. I'm curious how you first got interested in technology in general.
Thank you for having me. It's exciting to be here. And I guess I started showing interest in technology actually in the early 2000s when my dad introduced me to airplanes. And I had the luxury to experience airplanes and aviation and how they operate, what systems do airplanes have on board. So I would say aviation showed me the way, what technology is all about and what it can do. And ever since then, I've been interested not only in aviation, but different forms of technology, software and hardware.
Yeah, and I am so tempted to just have a deep conversation about avionics and transponders. And in a previous life, I used to write documentation for airplane systems and about the layout of all the cabling and the various components within your typical aircraft. And I think it's an amazing education in technology in general, because not only do you learn about these basic components and how they all work together, there were so many other technologies that rose up in order to make it more efficient to create sophisticated aircraft. For example, augmented reality. Maybe not a lot of people know this, but augmented reality really got a big start in learning how to lay out the cabling systems inside an aircraft chassis so that the people who were putting the aircraft together could see where they needed to lay the various components.
They are related. I mean, redundancy, duplicated safety systems, they all actually apply on autonomous vehicles as well. And we take great note of aviation, actually. And when we come to telesupervision and teleoperation, this is also something that the aviation industry is actually using, by having air traffic controllers who oversee a fleet of airplanes.
Well, that's an excellent point. You studied aviation management. You earned degrees in that. I'm really curious what your journey was like from the world of aviation toward solving last mile challenges in the delivery space.
First of all, both industries are super difficult. It's extremely difficult to run a profitable airline. And having come from the airline industry, I can tell you that a profitable airline is something that you don't see that often. And now we are pioneering autonomous vehicle industry. And it's as difficult as airlines. I mean, we are laying the bricks and we are putting down the foundation on which the new industry can really exist. Abundance is vast and progress is gradual. Put them together and it will take you on a journey. And it's been a gradual journey so far, coming from the airlines, establishing one of the largest and first locker networks in Europe and in the US. And it's been a progress. So as new technologies emerge, we take note and we try to implement them and pivot and trial. And it's been a long kind of experiment, but finding profitable business models in the meantime and in between.
To that end, I would love to get your definition of the problem that Cleland aims to solve.
So Cleland is first and foremost a technology company focusing on autonomous driving systems technology. And the hardware we manufacture is an extension of the software. So I could say that we are combining the best hardware and software for a sustainable future, really, by building physical and digital infrastructure to make autonomous mobility a reality for industries worldwide. But we have to start from somewhere, and we have chosen the last mile space to be extremely underserved. It's one of the biggest cost elements for companies operating in the logistics space. Up to 60 to 80% of the last mile cost is actually labor-related cost. And at the same time, we have the shortage of drivers, ever-increasing volume of packages that need to be delivered. So we have chosen this space specifically because it's difficult and risky as well. So we see that if we solve one of the most difficult pain points in the logistics chain, then we have a really high likelihood of expanding that technology to different sectors. So we are keeping our systems in the inner city areas. The carriers are driving in a safe manner in neighborhoods, different communities, serving customers in a polite, quiet, safe manner. And I think this is really necessary to really get consumers acquainted with the technology, get them feel comfortable with new technologies. Mm-hmm. I think starting with the toughest task is somewhat risky, but it's also really rewarding if we do solve it.
This is fascinating. So I see this as the approach of defining a specific problem so that you can really focus your efforts, identify where the challenges are, where the bottlenecks are, and then engineer a solution to those. And from what it sounds like rather than the open sandbox where everything is a possibility, it makes it very difficult to focus on specifics. By identifying a very particular challenge, this last mile delivery, you have defined the context of what needs to happen. And from what you're saying, to me, it sounds like it's multifaceted. There's the technology side of solving that problem, but there's also the social side, getting the social buy-in for autonomous vehicles, which is its own problem. Then there's also, I imagine, the political challenge as well, making sure that you are able to meet with legislators and to achieve the agreement from them to allow those vehicles to operate on public roads. So it's a multi-pronged kind of challenge you're tackling.
Absolutely. There's no one who right now knows exactly what's right and wrong. We have decided that we, in addition to deploying the vehicles, we want to educate. We want to educate the communities. We want to educate the lawmakers and tell them what is realistic and what is not, what is safe and what is not. And we've been lucky to be actually the first company in Europe in 2020 that was allowed on the public roads with completely unmanned vehicles. And we take the same approach as we take with our customers when talking with authorities. Let's begin with a very simple test, very simple demonstration and showcase, and then gradually add more technology, add more autonomous driving capabilities. And once everybody is comfortable with that setup, we can go beyond and we can test more and more and show what the vehicles are actually capable of when they are given more permissions, basically.
Excellent. So we're talking about a combination of autonomy and teleoperation. I imagine that connectivity is an absolute foundational technology for your approach. In order to have this teleoperative control, you need to have something where you have no latency. If you are operating a vehicle on a public street and someone comes to a quick stop in front of you, the teleoperator needs to be able to respond in kind in order to avoid an accident. So can you talk a bit about how connectivity plays a part in the operations of Cleland at the stage you're at right now?
Connectivity is crucial for our services. We definitely need a wide network coverage, especially in the US. We've been really lucky to have a partnership now in place with T-Mobile, and this partnership enables us to expand rapidly in the States. So the big question always is, do we have the necessary latency to offer our services in a safe way? And the results so far are great. Our latency today is around 100 milliseconds, which is actually faster than any person who takes decisions in the real car. So I would say that our solution is actually as safe or even safer than any normal person driving on the roads. And by establishing those connectivity partnerships, we are partnering with the best-in-class wireless providers, and they are crucial to enable us to scale our mission to deliver the most reliable, safe, efficient, autonomous delivery platform.
Fascinating. With this approach to a marriage of teleoperation and autonomy, do you imagine that the future of autonomous vehicles will be a hybrid where there will be this communication outside the vehicle itself? Or do you think that we are going to focus more on an autonomous but fully siloed vehicle that's kind of its own computer?
The network that you're describing, that requires a lot of infrastructure investment. And it's not only one company that can achieve that. Mm-hmm. In this case, it would have to be a joint collaboration between connectivity providers, different technology companies that really make 5G and IoT technologies scalable as well.
Well, and that kind of is a great way to bring us back to the solving of the last mile, because as you mentioned, the last mile for delivery is the most difficult problem to solve. Can you talk a bit about some of the work that Cleland has done with various partners and how that has informed your approach to business and how that has evolved since the company was formed?
Sure. So we actually spent 4 or 5 years doing just silent R&D. No one knew about us, and we just popped up at the beginning of last year. That's when we launched our third generation vehicle. And since then, we've managed to actually sign up large amount of customers coming from both the logistics sector and retail as well. Because we keep our manufacturing side of things in-house, we are also capable of designing the exact vehicle that we want to use. And our vision was to have a really lightweight vehicle, something that you cannot get from any automotive OEM. And this has been well received by the US legislators as well. We fit nicely in a specific vehicle category. Mm-hmm. And that has gained us access to actually 5 states. And we are actually making the first steps to launch commercial services in the US. So we can already see from multiple use cases that we are not only matching the speed of delivery and the volume of delivery, but we are also making it more kind of affordable for our customers.
Excellent. Can you maybe go into a little more detail about those use cases?
Sure. We began testing with, for example, DHL Express at the beginning of last year. We were initially servicing DHL's own offices in the cities, but pretty quickly realized that we can actually go beyond and start servicing both B2B and B2C customers. So today we are actually driving, as we speak, on the public roads. We are delivering packages. We are in fact scaling the fleets as well. So it all began with just one simple test, one vehicle. And now we are expanding the fleets and thinking about expanding the operational domains and regions as well in Europe, going beyond Estonia, starting operations in France, in Germany. We just launched a delivery service in Harvest near Dallas, where we are working with a company called PostNet. We see great traction from many, but now for us as a company, it's the question of with whom we work and how much will we scale at this current stage, as we need to internally scale our company as well at the same time. So it's always this balancing act, how much we do and how fast we develop so that the company can actually keep up with the development.
Now is the time to grow your capabilities. With T-Mobile for Business, you get a 5G network built for the way business and tech converge today. So whether you're using AI to decode customers, autonomous robots to deliver flowers, or smart shelves to help manage inventory, you'll have the speed, capacity, and coverage you need to take your business to the next level. Learn more at T-Mobile.com/now.
When you're looking to scale up and hire more people, what are the skills that are most important to Cleland when you're out scouting for talent?
We are actually a really unique company in a sense, as we have our own in-house university or academy, which we created a couple of years ago. So instead of going out and trying to find the talent, we are actually training young people to become mechatronics engineers, software developers, and that's all happening in-house. because even if we go out and try to find top talent, they necessarily don't have the practical experience. As I mentioned, the hardware is just the extension of the software. So we need people who can work with both hardware and software and understand how the hardware operates as well. And inside our company, we have the luxury of putting those two together. So the students who actually study with us right now, they have a really high degree of practical experience. And I would say that my ambition is actually to scale the university and education part even more in the future by establishing perhaps a US academy and bringing the know-how from Europe, from Estonia to the US. So I think what's lacking in the educational system right now is really the practical side of things. And I see that technology companies should be actually open to include students in their everyday work and life and let them test and let them engineer on the physical product itself.
That's amazing. I think that's a really inspiring approach toward developing talent because, as we know, the skills you learn in tackling something like this, those are the same skills that are going to be useful in applications that go well beyond even autonomous driving.
Yeah. I think it's much better to upskill people who are interested in technology, and that way we get motivated, eager to learn people who want to contribute in reality. They're not just after the paychecks. We are giving our students like a quad bike to begin with and telling them that this quad bike needs to be remotely operated by the end of the course. And together with us, they are capable of achieving that, right? So that's how it goes, step by step.
I love that the vehicles themselves are these lightweight, smaller vehicles. I was also really interested in the fact that they are all electric vehicles. And I think that was a fantastic decision. Was that something that you had made a conscious decision early on, or was it driven by engineering needs, or was it a combination?
First of all, electric vehicles are, in our case, actually lighter than any combustion engine vehicles. Secondly, we saw the emergence of green cities and zero emission zones. So we wanted definitely to have an electric vehicle which doesn't consume a lot of electricity. I can tell you that we only use 42 watt hours per kilometer, which is actually a super low figure. Any normal electric car would use 200-300 watt hours. So the cost of driving the vehicle should be really low. We can calculate that it's approximately a few cents per mile. And actually it has been paying off because we now proved and showed to the legislators and the government that we are small, nimble, we drive at really low speeds, we don't pollute.
And that kind of leads me to my last big question, which is, do you have any advice for business leaders who find themselves needing to work with local or even federal or countrywide legislators? What are the sort of approaches that you found to be really effective when you are dealing with people who aren't in the tech space, but they are in the legislative space, and it's their duty to protect citizens and landmarks and all of that?
I would say the most important thing is to establish a friendly communication line, and show that the technology is not a threat. It's actually beneficial for the communities. And that's only possible if you just bring the technology to them, demonstrate, let them test it themselves, and that way kind of gain more trust. We show them how we do it, why we do it, and let them be like part of the roadmap. Let them be in charge of deploying the vehicles and giving the permissions. In some cases, we allow the legislators to sit behind the wheel, take the wheel, try to teleoperate the vehicles, test the latency, test the ADS systems. And once they get the feel of it, they understand and they allow us to do more.
Before I could let Sander go, I needed to ask him one more thing. What's the best advice you have ever received?
I think it might come from my dad, who said that if you want to do something and you really believe in it, just do it first and then ask permissions later. The idea here is that if you start asking questions from the early on at the idea stage, then everybody will tell you that it's not possible. No, it's not allowed, it's not permitted, technically impossible. But if you just take the leap of faith and do the MVP, then you have control and you have something to show. And if you have something to show, you can communicate that value to others. So begin with your belief in what you're doing and just do it as a first step.
Wow. Well, Sander, this has been a phenomenal conversation. I wish I could stretch it out longer, but I respect your time too much. Thank you so much for being on The Restless Ones.
Thank you for having me, Jonathan.
Thanks again to Sander Sebastian Agur for joining the program today. I admire the engineering-focused approach Cleland takes to business. Clearly defining a problem and then formulating a solution gets right to the very heart of engineering. And Sander's team have taken this philosophy beyond the technical requirements of creating an autonomous technology company. They use that same philosophy to identify pain points in getting social buy-in and in convincing legislators to allow vehicles access to public roads. The solutions may not always be as straightforward as swapping out one sensor for another, but defining the problem clearly goes a long way toward ideating a solution. And with Cleland's approach to teleoperating, the need for a robust communications infrastructure is obvious. It's only with access to high-throughput, low-latency connections that such operations are even possible. And meanwhile, we inch ever closer to a future in which autonomous vehicles can become a reality beyond the test cases. I hope you enjoyed this episode of The Restless Ones. Be sure to join us for future episodes as I sit down with more thought leaders in the tech and business sectors. And be sure to check out our back catalog of episodes to learn how restless leaders aren't satisfied with doing something just because that's how it's always been done. Until next time, I'm Jonathan Strickland.
Now is the time to flex your footprint. With T-Mobile for Business and the nation's largest 5G network, inspiration can strike from virtually anywhere. So whether you're in the office, on the road, or on your PT not quite you'll be ready for the next big thing. After all, if geography doesn't limit your business, your network shouldn't either. Learn more at T-Mobile.com/now.